بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. To proceed, inshallah, today we will have the chapter on al-nafas, which would be translated as breath or sigh. And we will continue the book of inheritance in following session, inshallah. So to start, let's go over Imam al-Harawi's chapter of nafas, or the breath. Imam al-Harawi, who died in the year 481 after the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said in his book Manaazil As-Saa'ireen, which means stations of the Wayfarers, قال الله عز وجل, under chapter 76, which is in nafas, قال الله عز وجل فلما أفاق قال سبحانك. Allah the Almighty said, and when he recovered, he said, exalted are you. Some of the translations said فلما أفاق, when he woke up. I usually use Sahih International in my translation, but sometimes I do some modifications. And here I chose recovered because it's afaq, he was shocked, and then he recovered from the shock. It is not simply waking up from sleep, but rather when he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to look at him, and Allah said, you will not be able to see me, but look at the mountain, and if it stayed in its place, then you'll be able to see me. And then when his Lord manifested himself to the mountain fell apart, and then Musa alayhi salam was shocked, and then Musa afaq would be recovered. So when he recovered, he said, exalted are you. And why is the Shaykh starting with this ayah? Sometimes the relevance of the ayah is obvious, and sometimes the relevance is subtle. But most of the choices of Imam al-Harawi rahimahullah for the ayat are very beautiful and meaningful. I mean, they're all good, but I'm just saying that some of them are particularly more subtle, but they're still very beautiful. Here, the idea here is that he is trying to basically draw a parable between this saq, which is a hal, and the ifaqa, which is the recovery from the saq. The saq is the shocking, so he was shocked because he was not able to handle the tajalli of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the Allah manifesting himself. And manifesting himself, how did Allah manifested himself to the mountain and not everything else? And in what way Allah manifested himself? Don't investigate, stop where you were made to stop by the verses, by the ayat and the hadith. Don't go beyond the ayat and the hadith, and don't try to extrapolate from the ayat or the hadith anything that is not given to you directly in the ayah or the hadith. But when this happened and Musa alayhi salam was shocked, and then he recovered, that is a hal. Saq is a hal. To be shocked because of a tajalli is a hal. And then he recovered, he came out of this hal, and that is like taking a breath or a sigh. When we talk about breath here, this is a spiritual breath, this is not a physical breath. But when you sometimes take a breath, you breathe in and out. You take a deep breath sometimes. And when you are distressed, don't you take a deep breath? Like if you're really distressed and upset or angry or something, and you're trying to suppress your rage, don't you go like this? You do. And then also when you are particularly happy, like or excited about something, don't you do? You do. So he is trying to draw a parable here between these physical breaths and the spiritual breath. And because the spiritual breaths also are taken in two different conditions. When you are distressed, you take a breath, your spirit sighs or takes a breath because of the distress, because of the loss, because of the deprivation. Your soul sighs and takes a breath. And when your soul also is transitioning from one station to another station, when you move from one station to another station, you take a breath to get ready for the following station. So in your ascending the ladder, the mi'raj, the stairway of faith, suluk, belief, getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you do take those sighs or breaths often. So that's part of the relationship between what Musa alayhi salam went through and the breath or the sigh that the Shaykh intends to talk about here, spiritual breath or sigh that the Shaykh intends to talk about here. Then the Shaykh said, يسمى النفس نفسا لتروح المتنفس به وهو على 3 درجات وهي تشابه درجات الوقت والأنفاس 3. يسمى النفس نفسا لتروح المتنفس به. Nafas or breath is called nafas because the breather finds comfort in it. Because the breather finds comfort in it. And Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah in Madarij, he tells us that everything that starts with noon and fa will infer, and these are ahkam aghlabiyya, not ahkam kulliyya. The difference between al-hukm al-aghlabi and al-hukm al-kulli is hukm al-aghlabi applies most of the time. Hukm al-kulli is a universal rule that applies all the time. And certainly in matters of this nature, the rules don't apply all the time. They would apply most of the time. But still, if they apply most of the time, then they are good rules to ponder. But he says that whenever you have noon and fa at the beginning, and then a third letter, regardless of the third letter, we're talking here about some form of departure or exiting, coming out of a state, a place, and so on. Or a departure from an ongoing default. So if you say nafas, for instance, it's a breath. And when you say من نفس, when the Prophet ﷺ said من نفس عن مؤمن كربة من كرب الدنيا نفس الله عنه كربة من كرب يوم القيامة, whoever relieves, that's why nafas could be called the respite also. Whoever relieves, nafas here would be relieves the believer from distress in this life, Allah will relieve him from distress in the hereafter. So it is about relieving, it's about taking you out of your distress, removing you out of your distress. When you say nafi, which is to basically drive away or exile, nafi is also has to do with coming out of a place or moving from one place to another. When you say even nafara, when we talk about like a military expedition, nafara, what is wrong with you when you are told to go out in the cause of Allah? Nafara, infiru fi sabilillah, go out in the cause of Allah. When you talk about nafl also, nafl is supererogatory. And why is nafl, what comes out here? Nafl comes out from the fard. It departs from, it is different from the fard. So you're, as if you're saying, I want to sort this out. I want to remove this from the obligatory prayers. This is nafl, this is extra, this is additional. This is not part of the obligatory prayers, and so on. So, but if you combine the three-lettered word, noon, fa, sin, they will always infer some form of relief. Noon, fa, sin. Because nafas infers relief, And that's why the Prophet says, مَنْ نَفَّسَ عَنْ مُؤْمِنٍ كُرْبَةٍ, whoever relieves the believer from distress in this life, Allah will relieve him from distress in the hereafter. So that's what nafas is about. It's about relief, it's about respite, and the soul takes a breath when it is in distress, and a soul takes a breath also when it is moving or transitioning between two different stations or two different states. Stations will be maqamat, states will be ahwal. Maqamat is the plural of maqam, ahwal is the plural of hal, and we talked before about the difference between maqam and hal, and we said that maqam, usually it is acquired, hal is gifted. We said maqam is usually more stable, hal is more transient. So he says, يسمى النفس نفسا لتروح المتنفس به. The nafas is called nafas because the breather finds comfort in it. وهو على 3 درجات. It is of 3 levels. وهي تشابه درجات الوقت. They resemble the levels of waqt or timeliness or moment. Remember when we talked about the station of timeliness or moment, and we translated waqt, although literally you would translate it as moment, but we said that what is intended here eventually is timeliness. So what is the similarity between nafas and waqt? Well, there are 2 similarities. One is a more general similarity because your waqt, your time, is measured by your breaths. You are a group of breaths. Every time you breathe in and out, that part of you goes away and never comes back. You know, like how many breaths will you take in your life? They're counted. Let us say how many breaths, like 200 million, whatever, a number of breaths that you will take in your life. How many times you breathe, you know, it depends on your age, but let us say you breathe 20 times a minute. 20 times a minute, multiply this by 60 minutes, so you breathe 1,200 times an hour. Multiply this by 24 hours. What's 1,200 times 24? Who is good at math here? 24 times 1,200. It's going to be around, about 30,000 or something in that neighborhood. Yeah. So that, yeah, multiply this by 365, multiply this by your age, and you'll get the number of breaths that you'll take in this life. And every time you breathe in, you breathe out, that's 1 breath less, or 1 breath down towards the end. So you measure, that's how your life is measured. So that is like, that's the relationship, that's the relevance here. That's the relationship between timeliness or the station of time, the moment. You want to capture every moment, you want to capture every breath. Every moment should be dedicated to Allah, to the cause of Allah, which does not mean every moment would be dedicated to ritualism, because the cause of Allah is a lot more comprehensive than only rituals. Although the rituals come at the heart of this, you know, your salah, certainly, and so on, but it is more comprehensive than this. But every moment of your life should be dedicated to the pursuit of His pleasure, even when you are asleep, as we explained before. So that it applies to timeliness, and it applies to nafas. It applies to waqt, and it applies to nafas. And also the other relationship between waqt and nafas is that both are ahwal. Both are transient inner states. Both are ahwal, both are transient inner states that come and go. So, okay. And then the Shaykh said, وَالْأَنْفَاسُ ثَلَاثَةٌ. There are three different types of breaths. النفس الأول نفس في حين استتار مملوء من الكظم متعلق بالعلم إن تنفس تنفس بالأسف وإن نطق نطق بالحزن وعندي هو متولد من وحشة الاستتار وهي الظلمة التي قالوا إنها مقام. The first breath is a breath taken while being veiled. It's full of turmoil and associated with knowledge. When he breathes, it is with sorrow, and when he speaks, it is with sadness. To me, it emanates from the lonesomeness of being veiled. It's the darkness that they consider to be a station. النفس الأول نفس في حين استتار. The first breath is a breath taken while being veiled. So we said that you'll take a breath in distress or in joy, out of distress, out of joy. This is the breath that you'll take out of distress. When you get veiled, when you get obstructed, when you get barred, when you get impeded, when you're slowed down because of your own doing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not do this to people unless it is of their own doing. قُلْ هُوَ مِنْ عِنْدِ أَنفُسِكُمْ. Say it is from your own selves or your own work, your own doing. But you get veiled sometimes. Sometimes you're invited, sometimes you're empowered, sometimes your path is facilitated for you, sometimes you're veiled. And that happens to everyone, because the Prophet ﷺ said in a Hasan report it was collected by Abu Nu'aym from Ali radiallahu anhu. Abu Nu'aym in his book al-Hilya, he reported this from Ali radiallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ said, ما من القلوب قلب إلا له سحابة كسحابة القمر بينما القلب مضيء إذ علته سحابة فأظلم إذ انجلت or تجلت فأضاء. So there is not a heart except that there is not a heart out there except that it has clouds like the clouds of the moon. Clouds like the clouds of the moon. بينما القلب مضيء, while the heart is shining. علته سحابة, a cloud covers it. فأظلم, and it becomes dark, or it gets darkened, or it fades out, it loses its light. فأظلم is in تجلت or انجلت, then it moves away, and then the heart, the qamar, the moon, shines again. The moon shines again. So hearts are like this. You have clouds that cover your heart, one after another, one after another. And those clouds will cause your heart to basically lose its shine, to lose its energy. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ لِكُلِّ عَمَلٍ شِرَّةٍ وَلِكُلِّ شَرَّةٍ فَتْرَةٍ. Every deed is, for every deed there is a shirra, time of energy, and every time of energy is followed by a time of lethargy, lassitude, weakness. إِنَّ لِكُلِّ عَمَلٍ شِرَّةٍ وَلِكُلِّ شَرَّةٍ فَتْرَةٍ. So the Shaykh is talking about, when there is a istitar here, when the moon is covered, when the heart is covered by the cloud, that's your istitar. That is your being veiled, being obstructed, being barred, not finding the sweetness of faith that you had before, not finding the energy that you had before. And that is certainly a condition that would warrant justifiably turmoil. مملوء من الكظم, it is full of turmoil. Kazm is to suppress or repress, to repress your rage, your sadness. And so it means here that it is full of turmoil. متعلق بالعلم, associated with knowledge. Usually the Shaykh in the first level, he talks about people who have the knowledge, but they may not have the sort of the spiritual experience that brings about, the sweetness, and it varies. Sometimes things are a little different. It depends on the particular station that he addresses. But usually the Shaykh talks about knowledge in the first level, and the knowledge Certainly, there is knowledge that is, that you acquire for the sake of Allah, and knowledge that you don't acquire for the sake of Allah. The knowledge that you don't acquire for the sake of Allah, the knowledge that you don't apply, the knowledge that you acquire to show off, or the knowledge that you acquire for intellectual luxury, or the knowledge that you acquire to pass the test, or the knowledge, whatever reason. That knowledge, we're not talking about it because that is not part of the journey to begin with. That actually takes you away. It takes you off the path. It brings you back to where you were. It takes you off the path. It swerves you away. That's not the knowledge. But we're talking about the knowledge here that is intended for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yet you did not yet develop the experience. You did not sort of experience the sweetness of faith that comes with mujahada, that comes with your struggling for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It comes with the purification of your soul. It comes with your basically shunning of your ego. It comes with so many things. So here, متعلق بالعلم, he is in distress because he has the knowledge, particularly the technical knowledge. He has the knowledge that causes him to be concerned about his state, but he does not have the sweetness to give him the comfort, to give him the energy, to give him the comfort. He just has the knowledge. And he is diligent. He is not negligent. He is a diligent worshiper. He is a diligent servant. And he feels that darkness, and he feels that lethargy, and he has the knowledge that would motivate him to go forward, and he can recognize his lethargy. He can recognize his being veiled, but he does not yet have the sweetness that will carry him, that will give him the boost, give him the comfort to endure this state. So he takes a deep breath. It's out of distress. He sighs. That is his spirit, sighs. Sometimes the spirit also, your spiritual condition could manifest physically on you. So you could actually literally take a deep breath. You feel veiled and your spirit is sighing. You could be sighing also, physically. Okay. In تنفس تنفس بالأسف, when he or she breathes, it is with sorrow, and when they speak, it is with sadness. وعندي هو متولد من وحشة الاستتار. To me, it emanates from the lonesomeness of being veiled. وهي الظلمة التي قالوا إنها مقام. It is the darkness that they consider to be a station. It is the darkness that they consider to be a station. So this darkness, some of the masters, when he says they, he means the masters of the path. The masters of the path of tazkiyah, tasawwuf, purification. That's what he refers to when he says they, qalu, or something of that nature. So it seems that Imam al-Harawi does not consider this to be a station. It seems because he's saying التي قالوا وهي الظلمة التي قالوا إنها مقام. It is the darkness that they consider to be a station. It is unclear whether Imam al-Harawi considers this the station or does not consider it a station. Okay, but like I said, this is a transient condition. So a station would usually be more stable, established. And because this is a transient condition, this is likely a hal, not a maqam. This is likely a state, not a station, because of the transience. And because it is not something that you necessarily work for, that sigh, it is not something that you work for, or that zulma, that darkness, it's not something that you work for. But are they right when they say a station in some sense? Could you also find justification for their describing of this hal of lethargy, this hal of being veiled, this darkness, this dhulma? Can they be justified to call it a station? So Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah in Madarij says, yes, you could from, in some respect, from one angle, you could justify calling this a station. Which angle? The angle of the consequences. What happens when you go through this station? The station is very beneficial, Ibn al-Qayyim says. This dhulma is very beneficial. If it is meant to be transient, certainly if the dhulma will last forever, that's never good. But if this dhulma is transient, if this veiling of the heart is transient, then it is beneficial. So here are some benefits from going through this, from going through this darkness, from being veiled, from finding this lethargy, from feeling barred or uninvited. One, you will not take your other ahwal and maqamat for granted. You will not take any of Allah's gifts for granted. Right? Yeah. Because when you go through this darkness, you will not take your previous stations for granted. You know that you could lose them at any time. Two, you will not rely on your ilm or your hal or your maqam or anything that relates to you or pertains to you. Because it obviously can be quickly lost. So you will not rely on your knowledge, your inner state, the sweetness that you feel sometimes or that you can taste sometimes. You will not even rely on your more established stations, things that you have worked for and acquired. You could lose them anytime. So that is a reminder, that dhulma, that darkness is a reminder of this. So count not on your heart, count not on your work, count not on your hal, count not on your maqam, count not on your knowledge. You will only count on His grace. So that's the second benefit, and it is a great benefit. Third is that when you taste the sourness of deprivation, wouldn't you appreciate more and better appreciate thereafter the sweetness of your connectedness with Allah, the sweetness of His grace? Absolutely. So if you can only ponder those three benefits, and there are other benefits, but ponder those three benefits, aren't they so great? To make that dhulma, that darkness, that phase of lethargy, that phase of feeling disconnected or uninvited, to make it a station, a maqam, yes. But anyway, technically speaking, you can't call this a maqam because of two main reasons. You can only call it a maqam in one respect that we talked about, that it is very beneficial. If this dhulma is meant to end, it is very beneficial. Going through it is very beneficial. So you could say that it's a station that people go through to get to higher stations. So that's why it is maqam in that sense. But it is not a maqam because you don't work for it. And because it is transient. It is hopefully transient. So this dhulma, or the cloud that covers the heart, as we said before, ما من القلوب قلب إلا له سحابة كسحابة القمر بينما القمر مضيء إذ علته سحابة فأظلم إذ انجلت فأضاء. So that hadith that we talked about, how do you make this cloud go away quickly? Well, that's a whole different discussion that will take a lecture by itself. That is, how do you revive your iman? How do you renew your iman? How do you boost your iman? But a quick advice or counsel from our most beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, as Muslim reported from al-Aghar al-Muzani, he said, إنه ليغان على قلبي وإني لأستغفر الله في اليوم 100 مرة. إنه ليغان على قلبي وإني لأستغفر الله في اليوم 100 مرة. What does إنه لا يغان على قلبي mean? Veiled. Which it will mean that my heart gets veiled at times, or at least his heart doesn't get veiled in that, in our sense, but he consider any moment that is less than optimal to be like a moment that he would spend in anything that is less than optimal in his assessment, to be a lost moment or to be a moment of veiling. That is in his assessment. That is not in our assessment, but that is in his assessment, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So إنه لا يغار على قلبي, my heart gets veiled, or at least we could translate this to mean, although that is not the literal translation. Literally, he said, my heart gets veiled, but you could say that I perceive a veil on my heart, because his heart does not really get veiled in our sense, but in his sense, yes, because he is Sadiq al-Masduq. So my heart gets veiled. So what did he say? وَإِنِّي لَا أَسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهَ فِي الْيَوْمِ مِئَةَ مَرَّةٍ. And I ask Allah for forgiveness every day 100 times. And as we said before, the numbers usually used in Arabic, that's the mantiq of the lugha. That is the logic of the lugha. That's basically the brain of this lugha. The numbers are not meant for their exact number. It's not like a numerical figure. It is to indicate, a certain sort of frequency, amount, etc. So it could be more than 100 times. Could be more than 100 times. وإني لا أستغفر الله في اليوم 100 مرة. So in order for you to get that cloud to move fast, istighfar but it is sincere istighfar. It is true istighfar. It's true tawbah, true istighfar. It's meaningful istighfar. It's not astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. It is meaningful istighfar. Try to think of your iniquities. Try to think of your aggression, your wrongdoing, your shortcomings. And if you don't find, then that is really disastrous. Then you are really in bad shape. If you can't basically think of your iniquities and your shortcomings, then you are really in bad shape. And in this case, you do want to go back and learn, because it seems, and you do want to, have رفقة الصالحين. والله ما نجا من نجا والله ما نجا من نجا إلا بصحبة من نجا. By Allah, no one will be saved. None of those who were saved except by the company of those who were saved. So, رفقة الصالحين, the company of the righteous, learning, this is meaningful learning for the benefit. Is your way to end this condition of heedlessness where you cannot even recognize your own shortcomings and your own iniquities. That's iniquities, with the world, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the world. That's fading short in your worship, in your dedication, that is wrongdoing your spouse, your neighbor, your co-worker, even something from the distant past, something from the distant past that you want to, or the distant past, I guess, it can also work. But something from the distant past could still come back and hurt you. So you do want to go back and figure out what is hurting you, what's causing you the hurt. Okay, so istighfar. Then the Shaykh moves on to the second level here, and he says, وَالنَّفَسُ الثَّانِي نَفَسٌ فِي حِينِ التَّجَلِّي وَهُوَ نَفَسٌ شَاخِصٌ عن مقام السرور إلى روح المعاينة مملوء من نور الوجود شاخص إلى منقطع الإشارة The second breath is a breath taken while beholding the divine appearance, and it is a breath that is in the station of bliss, looking up towards the liberation of eye-witnessing, full of the light of wujud, which is actuality or actualization, which we will come to discuss inshallah if Allah gives us the tawfiq and the umr inshallah to get to station 96, because wujud is station 96. And looking up towards the cessation of all signals, and looking up to the cessation of all signals. Okay, so nafas al-thani, and as we said before, the second level is usually about the hal. The first level is about the diligent worker, the ghayur, who is diligent and who's working and is trying to apply his knowledge and so on. The second level is about the one who's truly experiencing the sweetness of faith. This is one who had dedicated more effort to the cleansing of their hearts. Their hearts now is starting to shine, and then when the heart starts to shine, then it starts to receive imports that will even boost the iman and uplift them spiritually to higher stations. So this is a different type of nafas. And nafas al-thani is also a nafas in a state of bliss, not in a state of, or a station of bliss, not in a state of darkness or sadness. Nafas al-thani, and there is something here to, you do need to go through the first level to get to the second level, right? Because you can't get to the second level without going through the first level. So that's the mujahada, and it may take you 20, 30, 40 years to get to the second level, but that is, I guess, your destiny. So in the first level, you may feel the burden, you may feel the struggle, you may feel the uptightness. Sometimes, mujahada, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. But then when you get to the second level, instead of carrying the burden of takalif, of the do's and the don'ts, the commands and the prohibitions, of commitment, it's called commitment. And instead of feeling the burden of commitment, that commitment itself will be the sort of the joy of your heart, the light of your life, be your carrier. You won't carry it, it will carry you. So that's nafas al-thani, nafasun fi hin al-tajalli. This is a sort of a blissful sigh, a sigh out of bliss. As we said in the beginning, you take that deep breath when you're in distress, but you also take that deep breath when you are joyful and happy. So النفس الثاني نفس في حين التجلي. The second breath is a breath taken while beholding the divine appearance. Tajalli usually is, they mean by tajalli is the divine appearance. This divine appearance is the appearance of the divine to the eyes of your heart. It's never to these eyes. It is never the appearance of the that, the ipseity of the divine. It is the appearance of the sifat and not the appearance of the sifat themselves. It is not the appearance of the attributes themselves. It is the appearance, basically, it is you being unveiled. It is your recognition being so powerful that it is a state that you are experiencing this tajalli. So the sifat are manifesting all around you. But your perception of the attributes of Allah, your perception of the divine grace and divine attributes, your perception of the divine eminence, the divine grace, the divine attributes, is your problem, is what was veiled and now it is uncovered. So it is the phenomenon versus the noumenon. It is the phenomenal aspect of it versus the noumenal aspect. So it is your perception. When it gets uncovered, then your ability to perceive the divine manifestations or the manifestations of the attributes of the divine will be greater. And that is tajalli. It is not that the divine will appear to you the Zat of the Divine, Pseity of the Divine will appear to you, because as we said before several times, اعلموا أنه لن يرى أحد منكم ربه في الدنيا. Know very well, as the Prophet ﷺ said, and the hadith is reported by Muslim, know very well that none of you will see their Lord in this life. That means that you're not going to see your Lord. But كأنك ترى, as if you see him, that you're doing this with فإن لم تكن ترى فإنه يراك. So you're doing this with the eyes of your heart. So that is it's recognition. Recognition becomes so powerful that everything will be mutajalli. Everything will be so apparent, so self-evident to you. And your connection with Allah will be a connection of mukashafa, not a connection of ghaib, unseen. Still unseen in a sense, but you could, the eyes of your heart can see it to the point where you can almost say, I see it. Almost. Okay? So that's the النفس الثاني, نفس في حين التجلي. And the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one thing that will help you also enjoy the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to expose yourself to those attributes in the Quran and the Sunnah, to whatever the Prophet ﷺ tells you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever the Prophet ﷺ teaches you about Allah, or whatever the Prophet ﷺ had relayed to you from Allah. So whatever Allah says about himself, his actions, his grace, his attributes in the Quran, or through his messenger in the Sunnah. You take this unimpeded with reinterpretation or negation, and also yes, unimpeded. You let them flow. But before you let them flow, the ayat and the hadith of the attributes, you have to prime your recognition, your awareness with tanzih, that is Allah's transcendence and Allah's uniqueness. The emphasis will have to be on tanzih first. Allah says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Nothing is like him, and he is the all-hearing, all-seer. Nothing is like him, and he is the all-hearing, all-seer. Therefore, you have to prime your awareness and your recognition of these attributes with tanzih, 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 tanzih. Transcendence and uniqueness, transcendence and uniqueness, transcendence and uniqueness. Then, only then, for those people who are full now of recognition of tanzih, Allah's transcendence and uniqueness, you allow the ayat and the hadith to flow unimpeded. Unimpeded by reinterpretation or negation, but also uncorrupted by imagination, uncorrupted by modalities, uncorrupted by resemblances. So you don't resemble Allah to anyone. You don't think of the modality, the nature of these attributes. So prime your awareness with tanzih, with transcendence and Allah's transcendence and uniqueness. Then allow the ayat and the hadith to flow unimpeded by reinterpretation or negation, and uncorrupted by resemblances or modalities. Okay, so then you will experience that tajalli, inshallah, if you had worked hard in the first level. Then this nafas, he says, al-Shaykh says, وَهُوَ نَفَسٌ شَاخِصٌ عَنْ مَقَامِ السُّرُورِ إِلَى رَوْحِ الْمُعَايَنَةِ. That is in the station, okay. So in the station of bliss, looking up towards the liberation of eyewitnessing. Station of bliss, the bliss because of the tajalli, because of the mukashafa, because of being unveiled now, the cloud moved away, and you're unveiled, and you're happy and joyful. But the station of bliss here, we're talking about tajalli, but he's saying that you're still looking up to something, mu'ayyana, eye-witnessing. What's the difference between tajalli and mu'ayyana? Basically, mu'ayyana is complete tajalli. because tajalli could still be from behind the veil, and muayana is complete tajalli when the veil is completely removed. A thin veil, you could experience tajalli with a thin veil, but when that thin veil is removed, it is muayana, it's eye witnessing. And this is which eye, again, because we have to be very, very careful with this. Which eye? The eye of your heart. Okay. مملوء من نور الوجود, and it is full of the light of wujud. Full of the light of wujud, or the light of actuality or actualization, which we will come to in station number 96, inshallah. شاخص إلى منقطع الإشارة, and looking up towards the cessation of all signals. Cessation of all signals, he keeps this closer to self-annihilation, the next station. He is shakhis now, he is looking up to that. He's not there. He's looking up to the cessation of all signals. He will get to it in the next station. Get to it in the next station, because the next station, usually the third level, is the level of what? Self-annihilation, fana. Okay, and then when you're only capable of having that, that's the, according to the Shaykh, we've talked about this. Because we always get new people, so. But we, baqa, to subsist with Allah, by Allah, for Allah, is greater than fana. Fana can sometimes be a station towards baqa, but not necessary. Not required and not necessary, and not the most optimal. The most optimal is the station of the Sahaba radwanullahi alayhim, or the greats among the Sahaba, and this was the station of baqa. They subsisted with Allah, for Allah, by Allah, doing the work that is most pleasing to Him. Okay. So, but the Shaykh, but at least there are some elements of fana that everyone has to realize in order for them to move up to baqa. You can't go into the station of baqa when your ego is still hyperinflated, or when your ego is still causing you like a blockage, is in your way, or causing you a distraction, or your desires, or so. Certainly, there are elements of fana when your will causes you it has like this sort of friction. There is this friction, or this harmony between your will and Allah's will, and so these are things that you have to work on and you have to deal with before you get to the station of baqa. And these are the things that they want to emphasize in the station of fana. You have suppressed your ego enough that it is not causing you any impediment, and it is not causing you any distraction. And now you are looking up to the cessation of all signals. Cessation of all signals, or munqata al-ishara, because in fana, the experience that you encounter in fana cannot be described by ibara or ishara, by statements or signals. You can't point to it, you can't speak about it, you can't describe it, you can't describe it in any way, by statements, by speech, or signals. It is something that has to be experienced to be known. So he moves on to the nafas al-thalith. And nafas al-thalith, the third breath, is a breath that is mutahharun bima al-Quds, purified by the water of holiness. Purified from what? You wash your heart from beholding as-siwa. You wash your heart from beholding as-siwa. As-siwa means what? Al-ghayr. Al-ghayr means what? Anything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All else. All else. That is al-siwa. That is al-ghayr. So this heart has been washed, purified by the water of holiness. That's the water of devotion, from beholding, considering anything other than al-siwa. That is including your own self, for sure. Beginning with yourself. Okay. قائم بإشارات الأزل. قائم بإشارات الأزل, subsisting by the scheme of pre-eternity. Subsisting by the scheme or through the scheme of pre-eternity. So everything that is emerged, that has emerged, emergent, hadith, originated, hadith, anything that's originated vanishes now. The blanket gets thrown over the world. You go back in time, you go back in time, you go back in time. until, none of this world that is around you was there at one point, and Allah was there, and, the world was not. So that is going back to pre-eternity, subsisting by the scheme of pre-eternity. And then anyone who had thrown this blanket over existence will only see, pre-eternity, and will be living through the pre-eternal. وهو النفس الذي يسمى بصدق النور, and it is the breath that is referred to as the pure light. It is the breath that is referred to as the pure light. And then when you have this breath that is referred to as the pure light, you'll be like, Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma. So Abu Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said, كنا نتكلم أن السكينة تنطق على لسان عمر. We used to say that the sakina, which we talked about before, the sakina and the station of serenity, speaks out of Umar's mouth. So it's the divine tawfiq to the point that you are, the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes your tongue, becomes your eyes, He becomes your hand, becomes your, the divine becomes your hands and legs and eyes and so on. Tongue. So that is صدق النور, that's pure light. فالنفس الأول للغيور سراج والثاني للقاصد معراج والثالث للمحقق تاج. So the first breath is a lamp for the diligent, and the diligent is in the first level, working hard to implement their knowledge, to acquire knowledge, to learn, implement their knowledge, mujahada, struggle. والثاني للقاصد معراج, the second one, that this is basically for the seeker. The seeker is the one who is paying more attention to their heart, the one who is cleansing, and working harder on their heart. Certainly the first one is working on their heart as well, because there is never mujahada without trying to devote your actions, without trying to be dedicated. But this second one is paying more attention to their heart and to the subtleties and intricacies, and doing the deep cleaning and the crevices of their heart that are far away that people don't usually pay attention to. So the second is a stairway for the seeker, and والثالث للمحقق تاج, and the third, for the person who reached the last phase and the last station, or the last stage, is a crown for the actualizer. This is the one who's actualized all their potential, has been actualized concerning this station of النفس or this maqam. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. And we will come back in 7 minutes inshallah for our fiqh class.